What I see in you is the authenticity, service. I'm one of you. I just happen to be down the road a little further than you. So if you come on this ride, you'll probably end up liking your life better if you hang out here for a while.
Yeah, I need a bag, bruh. Send it through quickly. I'm making his dog like I'm in the big leagues. Yeah, I told him I'ma hit it out of stands. I deserve another 100 bands.
Welcome to another episode of the Married Game Podcast. We are the voice you trust when it comes to lust, and we are who you hire when she lacks desire. And today, we have a special guest in the man cave. Welcome, Larry Hagner from Dad Edge. How are you, man?
Dude, that I love that intro. That is so good, so creative.
A lot of our guests say that. They're like, "Oh, I like that."
Yeah,
So,
I mean, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here, man. We met a year ago? No, not a year ago.
It was March.
March?
Yeah.
So 6-8 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just liked your vibe. You've got a lot of people that have talked so much about your work and what you do, and I got to hear you talk at Josiah's event, and I was like, oh, I really enjoyed that. Like, I got a lot out of it, and I even try and ask my kids the questions I learned from that day, like, hey, what was your favorite part? What did you learn? Like, that type of stuff. And I just loved your creative take on what it means to be a dad. And in a world of a lot of people doing things that look similar, you stood out to me. And so it was, not only did I enjoy meeting you, not only do I enjoy like following you and hearing your stuff, but I was really excited to dive in and ask you some questions and about you and your thing.
Well, thanks, man. The same goes for you. When so like for instance the 5 dials, right? I love that, dude. I love that.
Yeah.
It is. It created so much awareness, and I'll never forget when you got to one of the dials. I'm like, ooh. Yeah, I could use a little bit of work on that one.
Yeah, it's so real, right?
Yeah.
But that's the same with your stuff. I just go, oh, that, yeah. You know what I love about your stuff too? I love stand-up comedy. I've done a lot of stand-up comedy, and the thing I love most about stand-up comedians is they make you look at something from a different angle, and they almost push you to a point where you go, oh, I can't unsee that.
You can't unsee it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love when a comedian takes me there, and it's awareness. You're like,
Yeah.
I haven't thought of it from that angle, but you gave me that when I was listening to you speak at Josiah's event. So I got some questions, man. Is there anything you want to open up with that's like that you get pumped to open up with, or can I just dive right in?
Oh, you can just dive right in,
All
man.
right.
I'm ready.
I'm an enthusiastic interviewer.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't have even invited you to come out here and be a part of this if I wasn't like genuinely like really interested to hear more. So I have been a dad. My oldest son is 25, and my youngest is 9. I got 4 of them: 25, 23, 20. And 9. And I went through a lot of phases with these kids, especially with the older boys from about 18 to 20. Dad didn't know shit. Like, oh, God, Dad didn't listen to me, doesn't take my advice, doesn't care. And then around 20, coming in 21, 22, they both are like, oh, Dad, where did you learn all this stuff? And so, and everything in between. How big of a plate have you decided to take on when you said, we're going to talk about being a dad? I don't know. Where did that come from? Like, how did this start with you? And not necessarily the origin story of like you and all this, but like Dad Edge. What does Dad Edge even mean?
You know, so I'll tell you how it started.
Yeah.
And, one day, man, it was about 10 years ago. Just opened up the window, the sunlight hit my face, had this epiphany. I knew everything. I just had to share it with the world.
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, it was a face plant. It was such a face plant. To be honest, I was the guy that we serve today. Truth be told, I'm still the guy we serve today. I still, every day is filled with joy, and it's also filled with face plants. But the Dad Edge, what is it, right? So if you really look at, you were showing me around, by the way, this sick man cave, by the way.
Thank you, man.
And you pointed out several different things that were really, really meaningful to you.
Yeah.
And one of them is the hammer when you were a carpenter.
Yeah.
Right? Now, so where did the Dad Edge come from? The Dad Edge came from a lack of knowledge. And I started really thinking, I'm happy to share the story, but if you compare being a dad and in your realm being a husband, right? And you really look at education out there for that kind of stuff. It's something that's I don't even know how this even began, but it's how society, I think, has kind of set us up for this. And it's also our own internal expectation is that we should just wing it and like figure it out without taking any training, any education, just like, but we don't expect that from a carpenter. Like you show up to a job site and they're like, hey, did you go to carpentry school? And they're like, no, but I have a hammer and I've seen it swung a few times. And I've hit a few nails in and I know how to use a measuring tape to some degree, but don't worry, I'll figure it out, boss. Don't worry. And they'd be like, get the hell off my job site.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happens when our kids are born, right? Or when we walk down the aisle and say, I do, we're like, oh yeah, I'm on the job site. I think I've swung a hammer maybe once, twice, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So the edge is really, it's all about giving men the tactics and the skills and the model to follow. Because without that, we're just like, I mean, how many times in our dad journey, mine included, do we look back on something and been like, knowing what I know now, I would have done that differently.
Yeah.
But it's too late. But what would it look like if we could be proactive? You know, it's like you show up to the job site, be like, oh no, I've been through tons of training and actually I have 2 years experience. I really know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. Not to say that every guy who's a dad knows what he's doing, but it gives us more of a fighting chance if we have a little bit of training, a little bit of education around it.
Dude, you blew my mind because you're right. The two most important jobs, being a dad and being a husband, there's really no manual.
No. Just wing it. You'll figure it out. Best time of your whole life, right?
That is so stinking true. And you say when you're looking back and how would I do it different? Well, having a 25, a 24, or 23, and a 20-year-old, and then a 9-year-old, raising this 9-year-old has felt, I'm a very different, and I think the first three are kind of like a little jealous, like, dude, you're a really kick-ass dad. I go, well, yeah, I fucked up on you guys.
Right.
So, like, I've kind of actually been able to have that privilege of being able to do that. Okay, so what are some of the big, because in Married Game we talk about, we have like some big tenets, like, I know you think this way, but it's actually this way. And I know you think this, but it's really this. Do you have some of those that were just like huge mindset shift change that were like, that's like, that you almost like tenets that you cling to on being a dad?
So I just interviewed, I think this will make a lot of sense to you. And it just solidified for me on Monday of this past week.
Okay.
So, and it's so simple. So like if you think about, and it's really in line with what you do as well. I interviewed this guy, you should have him on your podcast as well. Adam Lane Smith is his name. He's a family licensed licensed marriage therapist by trade, has his master's degree in it, and then kind of retired from that and is now a coach. And he's written several books, and one of them is Exhausted Wives, Bewildered Husbands.
Okay, yeah, there you
right.
go. Yeah, that makes sense.
So he, the cool thing about all of his experience and everything that he's done, he's been able to literally take the things that we, quite frankly, make so damn complicated, and he just simplified the hell out of them. And he went through several different things, but one of them was this, and I think it's probably right in line with what you do. But he's like, do you want to know what actually transforms the lives of men or just human beings in general? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's easy. It's 3 steps. And I was like, yeah, I'm all ears, man. What is it? He's like, okay, the first one is have a model to shoot for. So in other words, like, what does good even look like? So if you really think about like dads out there and you're like, so if you were to sit down with a guy and be like, hey, what does good even look like for you as a dad? They'd be like, well, I would be more patient. I would be better with my communication. I would create more memories with my kids. I would have better conversations with them. You know, they'd be able to tell me anything. And you can tell they're trying to figure it out as they're talking. Right?
Yeah.
And so basically, like, we've done that in Dad Edge of what does good look like, right? So having that model, and you've done it too with the Married Game. And then the second step is the skills and the tools to bring the model to life. Right? The skills and the tools to bring the model to life. So like, for instance, like your 5 dials, you know, we have several different things that we teach that bring that, what good looks like together. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, now I'm hooked. Like what's number 3, right? Yeah. And he's like, here's number 3. It's experiential learning with other like-minded people. You shouldn't do this stuff alone. Human beings were actually never wired to really do this stuff alone. And so many men, especially dads, we isolate. Everything is good, fine, busy. That's about as deep as we get. And on the inside, we're like, can please someone just show me the way, because I don't want to have to ask for it because that's weak, right?
Yeah.
But it's having a community of like-minded individuals that we can learn by each other's by using the tools and the skills, but also leveraging each other's experiences. And I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, oh my God, well, that's Dad Edge. That's the Married Game. That's Warrior, right? That's all these platforms that are so successful, and it's because of those three things. So those are, I think, the foundational things that we all need to be better. I mean, if you even think of college, or if you think of martial arts, right? Your model is like the instructor, right? Or like the higher belts. And then you have the skills and the tools that they teach you. And then you've got the community that you're doing life with, you spar with, you practice with. And that's what makes really good students, right?
That is such a great framework. Like it's such a great breakdown. I'm like, yeah, that is actually what we all, it's not only do we need it, but like we actually all like that too. I like, you ever done anything hard with a group of guys?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And you just love it. Even if you've done it by yourself, doing it with the boys, like there's always like this is your first time. Have you ever like done like ice plunges or something like that?
Yeah.
Or cold plunge? Like, is this your first? Oh, you're gonna love it. You can tell they're a little nervous, and then the other guy's like, dude, it was my first time last time. And then there's the seasoned veterans, and everybody's like, we're all like pumped for each other. That is such a human thing. You're so damn right about that.
It is.
Now, was there is Dad Edge? Is it mean like why did you pick that name? I'm also very curious about that.
Yeah. So do you want to hear a funny story?
Yeah, I do.
So I think I have 1,100 episodes under my belt for Dad Edge, which used to be the Good Dad Project, right? So that's what I first started with, and it was the Good Dad Project until 2018.
Okay.
So, but here's the funny thing, like I started Good Dad Project in 2012, and that was actually the whole organization at the time, or whatever you want to call it, was actually named after me.
Okay.
I was the project. I was like, dude, I need a lot of work. I need to figure this out. And so like it was a project. And then, I started a blog, and in 2015 started the podcast, and it was still the Good Dad Project podcast. And what I can tell you is the Good Dad Project just never felt right to me, right? I mean, I think we all kind of choose perhaps the name or the vision of the movement or the organization we're trying to do, and it either feels really, really good or just doesn't feel aligned whatsoever.
Right.
And there's a part of me that's just like, this is just kind of not who I am. Like, I just don't feel like, because a project almost, in a way, it's something that you're building, which I think is super cool, but it also might, and it leaves you thinking that something's really broken. And that could be the case too, but that doesn't really get me all fired up to go do it.
Yeah.
But the Edge, and I'll never forget, I think I bought Tony Robbins' The Edge on CDs, like back in the early 2000s.
Oh, hell yeah.
And there was just something about that, The Edge, right, that felt really good, because it was like, okay, well, if I have The Edge, what is that? That means I know a thing or two that's going to make my life better, or my relationships better, or my mindset better. And having that edge, like I really gravitated towards that. And the more I talked about it, when I changed the name, like all of a sudden the mission just exploded. And I'm not saying it was because of the name, but I think men really enjoy being a part of something that gives them just a leg up on maybe where they were or among their peers just a little bit. It's like, oh, I see what that is, what it is now, because I've learned. And that just gives them that edge. And by having that edge, man, I truly think we can live more fulfilling lives, because edge is really knowledge that's implemented.
Dude, so good again, man. Because like, I'm hearing you say the energy of a guy doesn't want to be like, I'm a project I'm working on.
Right.
He wants to be like, no, I got the edge.
Yeah.
Like it's almost, there's an aspirational feel about like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Even like Wake Up Warrior kind of has that, like, I'm going to be a warrior.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's go. So I totally resonate with that. What do you see most commonly for guys when they come in? What's like the biggest thing that they're struggling with? Because I was having a talk with Garrett the other day. We were at lunch, and he's like, we're really just kind of waking people up and actually teaching them how to be dudes. And so, like, how to be just good men. Like, not a lot of guys are being taught how to be a man from their dad. And you're a part of that. Like, we're fathers, we're husbands, we're dads, we're business owners, we're all these things. And you've said, all right, if a guy's feeling like he's failing at being a dad, probably feels some remorse about it. Probably like, I thought I'd be better than this. I promised and vowed I wasn't going to be like my old man. and you got them right in that moment where they're like, dude, I'm a shitty dad. Is that normally where they come in at, or where do you meet them? Because they're listening to this podcast.
Dude, that's an incredible question. It's a variety, and I actually have diehard data on this. So ever since 2017, we have had men fill out an application to be a part of our mastermind, which is Dad Edge Alliance. So they have to take, some time. It literally takes 3 minutes, but it gives them some time to reflect on what's going on in their life. So we have real data on this. But do you want to hear something really fascinating from just a human behavior standpoint? So we really do that application for 3 different reasons. Number one, the application really helps a man just self-reflect for a moment. Of course, it's their name and email and all that, but we ask them like, hey, why are you applying? What is going on? What's going on in your life? And dude, God bless men, dude. Like these guys will pour, like I have seen paragraphs of things and I'm just like, wow. Like, and I mean, wow, being like, I'm so proud of the guys who come in and give detail because it's what they're actually doing, and not necessarily detail for us, but that's a moment where they're taking a productive pause and they're self-reflecting, right? And then they choose between 5 different choices. What is most meaningful for you to change, right? And so we've had over 4,000 men come through the program in the past several years, and 70% of men have identified marriage, right? That's why, and I really think that if you help a man with his marriage, as you know, I really think life becomes a little bit easier and the other things kind of fall like a domino.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
If you can help a man with his marriage, he's going to be more productive at work. He's probably going to take care of himself a little bit better. He's probably going to be a more patient father. But, the second reason we do it is because we want to give our team who meets with the guys, an understanding of where's this man coming in at, because some stories are really extreme. And some are like, no, everything's really good. I just want it to be better. Like, I just want it to be awesome, right? But here's the third reason. And I think some guys know this and some guys don't. But that application process is really a first test. The application takes 3 minutes. I just want to ask you, what do you think the completion rate on our application is?
Oh, shit. I'm just going to go with 50-50.
It's a good one. It's 28.2%.
Completion?
Yeah. And it's 2 questions. You're typing some things out and the rest is multiple choice. And the completion rate is 28.2%. That's really fascinating because if a guy can't finish 6 questions on an application, is he really going to do any work?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the answer is usually no. So the application of itself really helps a man reflect, like, are you serious about this?
Yeah.
Like, are you ready to do this kind of work? And some guys aren't. But the guys that come in, man, they embrace what we do and they engage in it and then they learn and implement. That's when we see real change. But yeah, it's mostly marriage. And then when it comes to marriage, because we ask even deeper questions when they're in our group and we ask them like, well, what's going on? What would you improve? And dude, I would say at least 75% of the time, communication. And then we probe them on that a little bit. We challenge them. We're like, okay, well, if you were to improve communication, what would be happening? And this is where I always hear the 2 adjectives, because I set them to more and better. I want more communication or better communication. We're like, well, you can't really measure that. So if you had more time to talk with your wife, what would that do? And then they're like, well, we would talk about, and you tell they're figuring out that we would talk about, deeper things, and we would talk about our intimacy, and we would talk about other things besides parenting and besides the chores, and we'd get to know each other again. Then you really start to see the guy's hearts, right? And then we tell them, well, if you need, how long has it been since you've had conversations like that? And usually it's like, oh man, like it could be anywhere from months to years. And then we're like, well, now you're talking about what's called creating an environment of psychological safety. And you're also creating an environment of intimacy again. And if you haven't done that in quite some time, it might feel kind of clunky. It might feel kind of awkward. She might be looking at you like, why are you talking to me like this? You haven't talked to me like this in so long. You're suddenly interested. All these different things. And then there's the better adjective. And we're like, well, if it was better, what would be happening? And usually we hear similar adjectives with that. But the gap is that the guys truly don't know. They're like, okay, now that I've said it out loud, I kind of know what good looks like, but I have no clue how to get there. So it's kind of like me looking at, I am not a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like me looking at that hammer being like, if I had to build my kids a tree house, I know what a tree house looks like. I've been in one. I think I could put the boards together, but you know what would be really cool is if you give me 25 steps to put this thing together.
Yeah,
that would be great. So, and that's where I think you come in with your program. That's where we come in with ours. But that's really the gap.
So I love that when these guys get vulnerable, they're like self-assessing, and it does bring about that self-awareness. That must be a special moment for you. I know it is for me as a coach to see when the light bulb go on for these guys, and they're like, wait a second, you mean, and I'm like, yeah, that's what we've been saying this whole time. They're like, oh, I get it now. What's the big thing? What's the biggest aha most dudes have when they come into your program? I can give you an example from ours, or unless you've got it, go for it.
No, let me hear yours. I'm always wanting to learn too.
So our biggest example when guys come in is they realize they're doing things to get approval and validation from their wife rather than doing it because that's their standard. And so therefore they can never get their wife to do what they want them to do. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're not the dude that any girl would want to do that for, and you're just doing these things and she can sniff out a fake.
Yeah.
Okay, agenda. So that's like, they're like, and then they get their power back and they're like, dude, I actually do this because that's the right thing to do, and I'm a dude, and that's what dudes do, right? So like that's a big shift for them where they go from taker energy, I want to giver energy, and that is I am this, and this is who I am.
I mean, I can definitely understand that, and I relate to that with even our guys, right? Because a lot of guys, and I'll never forget hearing you speak. It made me laugh because I was like, oh my God, that was me. It's like, I'm going to take out the trash and I'm going to make sure like I lift up the lid and I put it on the counter and she hears it. And then I have the bag like wrestle it around and I accidentally hit the wall when I go out. Because like if she knows I'm doing chores and then the dishes are like extra loud.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, it's it's what Dr. Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy, he calls it the covert contract. And yeah, dude, like, I mean, it's one of the most unattractive things for our women, for our wives. But to do something for your wife or to be a better man, just to be a better man, that is what is truly attractive. One of the biggest things that we work on with our guys is communication. That's one of the biggest things because, a woman needs to feel seen and heard, right? Mm-hmm. They need to feel seen, heard, and safe. And in our everyday conversation, like me and you, like if I were to come to you with any type of issue or problem, like I'd be like, hey man, and let's just say I get really authentic with you, right? I'm like, hey man, like me and Jessica, like Keith, I don't know what's going on, dude. Like we haven't really talked the way we usually do. We haven't been intimate the way we usually are. Like we're kind of like not fighting, but things are really off. Like, and we're both just like distant. Like even at night we're on our phone and you'd be like, yeah, man, that sounds really tough. I'd be like, well, what do you think I should do about it, right? Exactly. Because that's how guys talk, right? Yes. I want you to tell me what you think I should do. Otherwise I wouldn't waste my time or yours or my breath, right?
Exactly.
Now with our
so
wives.
That's
right?
so true, dude. Like saying, what do you think?
Right. Like, what do you think I should do, man?
Yeah.
Like, but our wives, I mean, they're wired up a little bit different, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the simplest things that we can do for a man is to teach him just how to be a better listener. And a lot of guys are like, okay, well, I listen to the words, right? I'm like, no, you actually listen for emotion. What is she feeling, right? Mm. So like, for instance, if my wife, so we have this boiled down to like, if your wife is coming at you with a negative emotion, not coming at you, like it's your problem. But like, let's just say like yesterday, I come home and Jessica, we got this new puppy. She's like, oh my God, Bernie crapped all over the floor. And he did that right before Colton spilled his milk and shattered glass all over the kitchen. Then I got your MRI bill, which was $1,300. And oh my God, I only slept 2 hours last night because the girl behind the concession stand at the football game gave me a caffeinated coffee and not a decaf coffee. So I'm working on 2 hours of sleep right now. And the old me would have been like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Like, why are you so upset? And she'd be like,
how invalidating.
Right. Invalidating. Right. So if it's a negative, if she's coming at me with negative emotions, right? Like it's in my DNA, like just to want to problem solve, right? And here's the cool thing, and you know this, and so do I. Our intention as men, when we solve problems, I care about you, and I want to take your pain away.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing. If I were to come to you advice, be like, dude, Larry, I like you, man. Let me help you with this because I don't want to see you in pain. Right? But our wives aren't necessarily wired like that. So if it's a negative emotion, what we always say is label what you think she's probably feeling, right? And just say it out loud. And by the way, don't label her, right? But label the situation. So if I say, you sound really upset right now, I should be like, well, yeah, no shit, I'm upset. Well, what the hell, right? But instead, I'd be like, that sounds really frustrating. So like globalize the emotion, but let her know, like, I hear every word you're saying, right? And I see what you're feeling. And then normalize it. Say, you know what, if I was in your shoes, or I think anybody was in your shoes, they'd probably pull their hair out and probably want to go take a nap.
God, we love that as humans. Like,
we do.
For people to be like, no, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
God,
or
we love that.
We do. And like, or to normalize it, be like, oh wait, so I'm not crazy for feeling this way. And then the third one is just to invite for more information. So I never say, well, why are you so upset? Because the word why is kind of brings us back to like our 2-year-old self.
What's your problem?
Yeah. Like, why are you upset? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you acting like that? Instead, I'm like, tell me more. What's going on? And then she'll just keep talking. And the more she talks, and what I'm watching for is, what are you feeling? You know, what is her body language telling me? What's her tone telling me? And here's the other thing too. I don't want to put every woman in a camp of like, oh, she just needs to be heard and never problem solved. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm ever confused of what my wife needs, I'm like, I was like, I really want to support you in the best way possible right now. So is that me listening? Because I'm happy to do that. I'll listen to you as long as you want to talk. Or do you want me to help you with solutions? What feels best to you? Mm-hmm. And she'll tell me. She'll be like, I don't want any solutions. I just need to get this out. I'm like, cool. And if she's like, you know what, I'm really confused. I don't know what decision to make here. And she'll tell me. And that's what, quite frankly, I know it sounds oversimplified, but that creates like so much connection, so much intimacy. We're emotionally connected. She doesn't feel. The other thing too, I think that's a huge miss, is that when we start problem solving right away, we invalidate, like you said. We don't validate her emotions. Plus we're stating like, I don't trust you to figure this out for yourself, so I need to come in and do it for you, which is really condescending, and it just completely decimates the intimacy. So if we and by the way, kids have the exact same needs, boy or girl. So we can use those same things with our sons, with our daughters, because they have those same needs too. But yeah, just that one skill in of itself, I think will create so much connection. I mean, even if you don't do any of the other stuff, like just that alone will help.
Dude, you made some amazing points there. I want to ask the question of like, well, why do you think so many guys don't do this? Or even, I know you're probably not perfect at it. I'm not perfect at anything that I teach either. I happen to be maybe better at the most, but it still means I got lots of improvement too. But why do you think so many of us don't do that?
Well, here's where I give men a lot of credit. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at why men just want to swoop in and say, hey, well, here's what we can do, or here's what you can do, or here's what we'll do together, right? And we'll fix it. It's because we love them. Mm-hmm. And people we love, we don't want to see them in pain, so we want to do something to take their pain away. And this is where I think it just is so confusing for men and women. But if we're only talking about men here, it's like, I mean, I don't know about you, but I used to suck at this. And I used to be an asshole. I'll just be, this is what I used to say to my wife. I would sit there and be like, okay, well, here, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. It's not that big of a deal. We'll work it out. And she'll be like, she would just look at me like, do you even hear me? I actually got up to the point, I'm ashamed to say this, but I would tell my wife, unless you don't want to hear my advice, don't come to me with anything.
Oh God, I've said that before too.
And
how stupid is that?
Yeah, how stupid. I literally, like, I feel like still to this day, I probably haven't done that in like 7 years, but I still feel like the need to go to my wife and be like, that was so dumb. I don't even know what the hell I was thinking. Like that was the polar opposite of connecting with you.
Yeah. It's almost embarrassing to think of the shit we used to do.
It is, but I think it's confusing for guys because we're like, I love you. I'm trying to help. Like, you don't see that? And then the woman's like, are you not hearing me? And the guy's like, I'm hearing every word you're saying. And she's like, no, you're not. And he's like, I'm so confused. And she's like, and I feel so unseen, so it just, and we keep going round and round. And then what happens, and you see these couples, and so do I, is the woman is like, I'm just not talking to him about anything anymore.
Yep.
And the guy is like, I don't know what to do. Like, and it just, that's where we're at, unfortunately, I think.
And once they do that, that's when the real disconnection like starts to ultimately happen. And then it's almost like, well, I don't know. Yeah, man. So it sounds like, do you deal with the wives much of any of these guys that come in here? Just mainly the guys, right?
Mainly, yeah, always the guys.
Is your target audience guys that identify as a dad, but realize as a dad they have problems in a lot of other areas as well?
Yeah, so if you look at what we do, it's called Dad Edge, right? A lot of what we do, though, is we help guys with marriage. We help guys with parenting more around connection, communication, and patience, especially the patience one, right? Yeah. And here's the other thing, too, about patience. Well, I'll get back to that. But then we help them with health, physical, mental, emotional health. We also help them with leadership, right? Those are the 4 areas that we really help men with. But, I mean, if you really look at, like, patience, so, like, I mentioned that guys will come and do life with us because of marriage and communication. When it comes to their kids, it's usually always patience. And here's where I want to let guys off the hook again. When we run out of patience, it's usually because we just don't know the right next thing to do. And it frustrates us. And then so it's the external stimulus. Like, let's just say your kid did something really wrong. And you're like, I'm so angry you did that. And I have no idea what the hell to do about it. And so we lose our patience with it. And maybe we do know what to do about it, quote unquote, by default, right? But maybe it was the way that we were raised. And maybe we're repeating poor behaviors and we know how shitty that felt. And so now you add on, I just lost my patience. I don't know what to do. And now I'm adding on shame and guilt because I'm acting this way. It just becomes this giant, for lack of a better word, mind fuck for guys that we're just like, I don't know what to do.
Dude, I hope there's a lot of guys that resonate with you and end up booking a call and talking with your team and hiring you because of this podcast, because you have such a cool way of looking at things. It's like in ways I go, oh, I haven't thought about that, or oh yeah, that's a really, like, your communication style is smooth and it's like clear, and you go, yeah, I could do that. And one thing I've learned, I guess maybe just in business in the last 20 years, I've only been doing Married Game for the last couple of years, like actually getting paid at it, like publicly, but for a couple of years before that, people would just hire me privately, like, dude, I heard you got your wife back. Can you help me get my wife back? So it was like just this thing. And what I come to realize is that people just gravitate towards personalities.
I agree.
Like, there might be guys that I hooked them in off of my ads saying, hey, when's the last time you got a blowjob or whatever? I don't say that, but like basically I hooked them. And then they come on or they listen to this podcast based off of that. And then they go, oh, I really like that guy. And then you are the key to help unlock them, whatever this thing is. That's why I really like having you on here too, because we're teaching the same thing. Like, let's be a good ass dude. But people just hear it from different people. Like, I really don't just believe in that, like, kinda. I believe in it all the way. Like, because I've looked, I mean, how many coaches have you had in your life?
Oh man, I always have somebody on the payroll.
Yeah.
Like I always want to learn.
Same.
So yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I hired this guy and this is what I learned. And there was things of his personality that I go, oh, I could grow in that with that. That makes a lot of sense. And then and that same coach or teacher might even have some things I go, I don't like that about him. But the things I do like about him, I want to add that to my life. And I could think all the different coaches I've had. And so it's cool to hear your perspectives on these different things. Do most guys struggle more with feeling like they've let themselves down as a dad? I know you said 70% come in for the marriage, but do they tie those together, like being a bad dad is affecting their marriage typically when they come in? So are most guys pretty good dads?
It totally depends on the individual,
okay.
And it depends on the situation. And sometimes it even, like even the age of the kid, like I'll use me as an example. Like, I have 4 boys. And one thing I've noticed that, I definitely identify myself as a good dad who makes a lot of really bad mistakes from time to
Sure.
time. But one of the hardest stages for me to relate to my boys was when they were like 5 and under. It was just difficult for me because I'm like, I mean, I would hang out with them and do stuff with them, but I'm kind of not the Lego dad. I mean, I'll play Legos, but I'm more like, let's go throw the football.
Yeah.
You know, let's go to the gym. You know, like,
Yeah.
and they or whatever. And usually when they're around that age, like, Dad, let's go to Top Golf. You know, or like, let's do something. You know, things that are, I think, more. And plus, like, dude, the conversations. Like, I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and everybody. You know, this is one thing I'll tell your audience. Whoever tells you just wait till they're teenagers, they'll treat you like crap, and like I'm just walk the other way. Do not buy into that story whatsoever, because if you do the right things with your kids, they will absolutely want you a part of their life. Like my 17-year-old son, he's like, Dad, he's like, me and so-and-so are, you know, big group of us, there's like 5 of us going to a haunted house this Saturday. I'm like, dude, that sounds amazing. He's like, well, we want to know if you want to come with us. And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, you want your dad? But he's asked me stuff like this before. Like last year for his birthday, his 17-year-old birthday, we went and did laser tag, like tactical laser tag. And I'm like, I'm the only dude out of all his friends. And I'm like, you really want me to go? And he's like, yeah, man. Like everybody thinks you're cool. And I'm like, I'm honored, right? Yeah. But I honestly think if you do the right things, because like the conversations that I have with my teenagers, if you do the right things, man, I love talking to those young men. Yeah. And I love the questions they ask, the conversations we have about school and big dreams and girls and all this other stuff. And what I'll tell you about just dads who come and do life with us, it kind of depends on, like, some guys are like, man, the 5-year-old stage, toddler phase, like, that was my jam. Now that they're older, they're teenagers, like they don't want nothing to do with me. I don't know what to do about it. So it just, the dad thing, it totally depends. Here's the other thing too, and I'm sure you've noticed this, is that it also depends on the dynamics of the home and the two different personalities and life experiences of the man and the woman. So like one thing I've noticed, like I've had several clients where like the guy's trying like everything, and the woman has had 1 or 2 or maybe even just one really horrible traumatic relationship in her life. And because like she never got through that, you know, he becomes her punching bag, you know, and some guys are just like, they're like, dude, I don't know what to do. I'm trying everything, you know? And then when that tension is in the marriage, like they notice that like, dude, if I could just get this together, like, I feel like I'd be better with my kids. Like I'd have more patience with my kids, but this thing is like hanging over me. So there's just lots of dynamics that are happening.
So a lot of dudes, it sounds like a lot of dudes reach out to you for marriage advice on what do you say? Because a lot of the stuff I see you talk about is being a good dad. So I didn't really see a lot. I don't see a lot of that. But is that a main? I haven't seen any of your ads either. So do you run a lot of ads?
I have never run one ad.
Okay, so that's why I've never seen it, because I'm like, I've never seen any of your ads. Okay.
I don't even know how to do it.
Okay,
So I think we're probably going to start doing that here. We put together some like some strategies around, like, because I am not a marketer, and we one of the guys in our group who's on our team, he's a marketing guy, and he's like, we need to run ads. He's like, you run ads? I was like, I've never run an ad.
Yeah.
But yeah. So no, I think what happens is, if you really look at like the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Every single podcast episode is going to contain 1 or 2 or 3 elements that we do. And whatever a guy feels a desire for, I mean, some guys, I mean, quite honestly, some guys come to us for health. Like they're like, I want an accountability group to be more physically and mentally and emotionally fit, you know, and they feel like, well, if I fix that, then I can go do marriage and parenting and all this other stuff better. So it just really depends.
Got it, man. That makes sense. Tell me, is there anything that you really want to say? Because I have some questions about the business side, because I just geek out on that stuff. And you've been doing Dad Edge longer than I've been doing Married Game. So I got some questions about that. But on the actual, like, okay, hey, man, you're talking to a dude. He's listening to you right now. You're like, I want him to know this. Anything that comes up that you like to say or want to say or feel led to say?
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is so important to me personally. And I think it probably stems from the fact that, I mean, I didn't even know my biological father until I was 30. And that was by accident. And I'm here to say 18 years later that my dad and I have a good relationship. My dad's 75 years old, and he's a good man, and we're friends. And he's got I have two younger half brothers. He's been married to the same woman for 45 years. And I know that there's a part of my dad, because he's told me, that he wishes he would have made better decisions. And I think about this now, what the decisions my dad made were extreme, right? Left. But I understand from a kid's perspective the impact of that. And what I can tell you is, Keith, I truly, truly believe in the heart of most men. And maybe that makes me naive, but I truly believe that if you really peel back the onion layers in a man's heart, he wants to be everything to his family. And the gap is he just doesn't really know what levers to pull and exactly how to do it. And there's some pride there, which I had as well. And he doesn't want to ask for help. But here's what I encourage men to think about, because I filter a lot of decisions through this one quote. And the one quote is this: the definition of hell is meeting the man that you could have become when you're on your deathbed. And dude, I don't want to do that. I don't want to meet that man. And every guy that I work with, I don't want him to meet that man. I want every guy to be on his deathbed and just smile and be like, man, it wasn't always perfect. In fact, it was messy, but I learned how to do a lot of it right. And because of that, I had an impact. I had an impact, and I didn't leave anything on the table, and I don't have any regrets. Just quick story to hit this home. COVID, right? This was May of 2020. We were kind of depressed and as a family, and I remember one night, I still remember exactly where we were standing, me and my wife. I was washing dishes, she was drying, and she was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "I'm not." And here's another thing too. If you really want to have an emotional connection with your wife, you don't want to be a sopping emotional estrogenic sponge, but you got to let her in on some of the things you're carrying, because otherwise she's just going to think that you're being distant and cold, and she's going to think it's her. And she's like, "Are you all right?" I was like, "I'm kind of not." And she's like, "What's up?" And I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "This whole thing's getting to me a little bit." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Jess," I was like, what if this is the end?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "What if this is the end of the world? Like, what if we're looking at the, biblical times, the big plague and all that stuff? Like, what if this is it?" And she's like, yeah. Or I said, "What if this is how we live from God only knows how long? Like, we're going to be trapped, people are trapped in their homes, right?" And she goes, yeah, that's a good point. And this is where you're married to a strong woman, and I know you are too. And she's like, "Could be." She's like, "Well, if you died tomorrow, is anything left on the table? Have you said everything you want to say to me, to the kids, to people most important to you? Is there anything left on the table?" And I'm like, "No." She's like, "Could you have said that 10 years ago?" I was like, "No." And she goes, "Then Larry, who gives a shit?" She goes, "Who cares if it's the end of the world? You've done it, and we've done it, and who gives a shit?" And I'm like, holy crap. Yeah. Right? And that's what I really want men to think about. So, like, for instance, when my 9-year-old wants to read one more bedtime story like he did last night, and my 7-year-old, and I told you a struggle there, he wants me to play Pokemon cards, which I have no freaking clue what that even is, or what the powers mean and the health means and all this other stuff, but I did it anyway, and I'm just like staring at these things. "Can you give me an extra 15 minutes to play Pokemon, Dad?" And I think about, like, what would I be thinking if I was on that deathbed? Yes, I will absolutely play 15 more minutes of Pokemon with you, even though I don't have no clue what I'm doing. Right. But this is what I encourage men to think about. And the last thing I'll say is this. If you don't know what you're doing as a husband, as a father, and you're just in a world of, like, kind of confusion, it's really not your fault. Because chances are you might have had a poor example growing up. There really is no manual out there for that. And society has really set up men, I think, to be like, if you ask for help, you're weak. If you don't have your shit together, you're weak. If you're this, you're weak. But here's what I'll tell you. You're not alone. Every single one of us are in the exact same boat. And it's the courageous man that raises his hand saying, life is too short and I ain't doing this. I need to figure it out. That's where I let men off the hook. And here's where I just sprinkle in a little bit of tough love. If you don't do anything about it, well, that's on you. Because now, like, look at it. I mean, you don't have to open the yellow pages anymore to find resources. You can go to the marriage game, go to Dad Edge, you can go to Warrior, you can go to, I don't even know what else is out there, but there's so much out there. You go to a therapist, go get counseling, go get a coach, whatever it takes. Get in rooms with people smarter than you so you can learn and live that life that you want. So when you're on that deathbed, hey, cool. Did it best I could.
Dude, I love it, man. I love it. Oh, dude, this has flown by.
What
Shit, we're like 46 minutes in. I thought we were only like 28 to 30 minutes in, so I wanted to dive in on some of your business stuff. I'll ask quick questions then, because I like to try and keep them 45 minutes to an hour, consumable. I'm assuming, guys, I don't know what the data on this one. This is just a total from the hip. But I assume guys travel about 20 to 30 minutes to work, usually in the car. So they can pop in an episode and be like, oh, dude, I know who I'm going to listen to on my way there. I know what I might be listening to when I'm sitting in line at, Starbucks or whatever, and I know who I'm going to listen to on my way home. So, all right, a lot of guys who listen to this, there's a lot of them are entrepreneurs because that's kind of who we after. And when my ads are going to be coming back here pretty soon, but I've always kind of like, hey, listen, if you're this guy, this guy, this guy, this is who we help. Everybody else, I don't know what to tell you, man. But there's a lot of entrepreneurs on here, but we also get a lot of guys that are wanting to become entrepreneurs or they're working their side hustle and stuff like this. And you have not only just, dude, you did this as a side hustle and then a thing. Can you just talk about that story as a man having the courage to be like, I can do these things, and you were successful in your, previous to Dad Edge. But then you're like, all right, I've got this thing on my heart and I want to go do this. I think there's more men out there, and I think there's one watching and listening here that have a similar call like you and I have where they go, I just want to share what the fuck I know to men, or I want to fix my life and I want to turn around and share it with others. And I think there should be way more of us, in my opinion, because if you ever go to the airport, you're like, dude, there's a lot of dudes around here who clearly need some help from a guy like you or a guy like me.
I agree, yeah.
So can you just talk about that journey and some of the fears you went through? And if I got questions I want to fill in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I left a very lucrative job in medical device sales. I did it for 18 years, and I went from sales rep all the way to middle management, all the way to executive level management, where I was a national sales director. And I was building Dad Edge at the time. I started the podcast in 2015, started the mastermind in 2016. And it was literally just, people would listen to the podcast and they'd hit me up, be like, hey, can you help me? I'm like, I just podcast.
Yeah, I'm a podcaster.
Yeah, I just podcast. I don't know what to, and then I was like, maybe there's something here. So I went and got my first coaching certification. And it really wasn't to start.
Who was that through?
It was called Pioneer Leadership and Coaching.
Okay.
It was like a 9-week deal. Like, it was a lot of stuff. And, but it was really helpful. And the thing was, I didn't go get that coaching certification because I wanted to start a business. I wanted to learn how to be better myself.
Yeah.
But with that, I was like, maybe I can help a few guys. So I worked with a mentor. I was in a mastermind, and I was like, what do I do with this? He's like, you want to know what to do? He's like, because I was in his mastermind. He was like, you need to create a mastermind for dads. I was like, well, how do I start that? He's like,
who was that, by the way? I'm just curious. I like
Aaron Walker.
Okay.
A great guy. He's from Nashville. He's one of Dave Ramsey's closest friends, and he's great. Everybody calls him Big A. But he said, here's what I want you to do. He's like, I want you to contact 15 people that you're closest to or the raving fans of what you're doing, and just tell them, hey, I'm going to start a 3-month program. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I know it's going to have some marriage in it, some parenting, some mindset and communication. Here's what the price is, and do you want to try it out with me and give me feedback along the way what you think about it? And I was like, okay. I was like, that sounds really terrible, but I'll do that.
Yeah.
14 of them said yes. And I was like, wow. So we did it. Created
What was
it.
the price?
It was only $100 a month.
Okay, $100.
Yeah,
Okay, got
it was $100 a month. And
so that's not replacing anybody's salary at this
no,
point.
no, not replace. It was just mostly for them to have skin in the game and
Yeah.
for my time and all that. Well, then what I found out was this was crazy. So we took the first 14 through the cohort, done with the first 3 months, and they're like, well, now what do we do? And I'm like, I don't know, go on your merry way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And they're like, well, what if we want to stay? I was like, if you want to stay, I don't have anything new for you. I was like, this is it right now. And dude, 12 out of the 14 were like, well, can we just do it again? And I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, like second time you learn more, right? And I'm like, I guess. I was like, if y'all want to.
This is such a good story, dude.
So they did it again. And then I ended up by 2016, I had 200 total guys go through the program. And I was like, God bless, maybe there's something here. But the missing ingredient was like having to tell these guys, hey, this is the end. And then one of our guys like, well, what if you made something evergreen that was just forever going, and then people could come in as they want and they can leave what they want? And I was like, that sounds like a really good idea. So in 2017, we launched Dad Edge Alliance, which is exactly that. And I'll never forget, we had our first like 25 guys. And then I was like, I need another coach, trained another guy. He started leading a team. I was leading a team. 25 turned to 100. Then we had like 6 teams. Now we have 100 people on our payroll, and we have 50 coaching groups per week and 900 guys who do life with us on the daily. And
Wow.
I would have never thought in a million years that we would be that. But here's where the story kind of goes. So like, it was probably right around 2019. Like I had built, and here's the other thing too, from a mindset, I was making about 200, 300 a year with my job. Mm-hmm. And I thought my in-laws of all people were going to think, what the hell's wrong? You cannot leave that job and my daughter and your boy and our grandsons to go on this whim, right? And then it was 2021. I launched my interview with Matthew McConaughey, and I was just like, I think this is it. And I left. I quit. And I got on the phone with my boss and I quit. And I went into my wife and I said, so I had enough that we'd be okay. And there was talks about it, but it didn't actually happen. I was like, so I quit my job. And she's like, what? I was like, I quit my job. And she's like, okay. She's like, well, what now? And I was like, I'm just going to pay myself from Dad Edge. I was like, I'll just cut a paycheck for myself from Dad Edge. And she's like, well, am I going to see a difference? I was like, no, not really. And she's like, cool. So you have more time for me? And I was like, yeah.
So were you nervous to tell her about it,
Yeah.
and like felt like there might be this like, what are you doing? What are you talking about?
Well, it goes back to your 5 dials, right?
Yeah.
Provider.
Sure.
And I never took one paycheck from Dad Edge in all the years I was doing it. I literally just kept saving everything that was profits, and I never touched it. So I was making a runway for the time I was going to leave anyway.
Smart.
And, but yeah, like I thought, especially my mother-in-law, like I'll never forget, she's like, you quit your job? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why would you do that? And then I told her, I was like, well, here's our monthly revenues. And she's like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, so we're good. We're all right. And she's like, okay. But I really did think she was, I was nervous because I thought she was going to be like, oh my God, like what if this happens or what if that happens? Because that financial safety aspect of it.
Yeah.
But she was good.
You have such a heart of service for the people you serve. Like, and I don't feel that from everybody, if I'm being honest, but I really feel it from you. And even just hearing your story about how this whole thing started, like just cements that narrative in my mind all the more. Like, I did this. I didn't even take a paycheck from it. I was still doing my other thing. Basic, I didn't know what to do next. And the guy's like, we fucking love hanging out. Can we stay around? Like, these are the types of stories I love, and I think that they're the real examples of how a lot of these brands actually come to be. The guy's just like, oh, I just had to go find more of me. Because you have 4,000 Larrys that have come through Larry's program because they all identify with Larry in some way and go, that fucking guy, how does he know exactly what I'm thinking? He's like, well, because he's me.
Still me. Just
Still you.
still,
Yeah.
I can usually just I just apologize quicker.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit more aware to fix things faster.
Dude, the opening of every one of our coaching calls is a story of what happened that week for me and Jesse. I'm like, oh, well, here's kind of how I messed up. Or sometimes like, hey, dude, I crushed this one. Let me show you an example of a really good thing we did. So I totally get that. What has been the biggest thing for you to help grow Dad Edge? Like, what has been the thing that you go, dude, once we figure this out, and then you share yours, and then I'll tell you what has been for me in Married Game, because it was a really significant, eye-opening thing for me. And I'm curious about your story.
That's a really good question. And I've heard this over the years, and it's just being real. It's just being authentic. Like, if you listen to any of my podcasts, all my dirty I can never run for public office because all my dirty laundry is out there.
Same,
you know what I mean?
Same.
Like, and that's what I think, and I don't use that as a manipulation tool. Like, I've literally from day one, I've always been that way. I'm like, oh, let me just tell you, like, dude, I ate a big slice of humble pie in front of my kids last night, apologizing to them about a few things, like real time. But I talk about that stuff very openly because here's the thing. I really do think that there's a lot of credibility to what you just said, because like do you remember the commercials back in the day for the hair club for men?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm
No,
not only
not only the client, but I'm the president.
I'm not only the president, but I'm also a client.
Yes, exactly.
I say that all the time. I'm like, I'm not only the founder, but I'm also the first guy in line. The way I look at podcasts, and I know you're on our show as well, I look at this seat as a front row seat to the most amazing education out there. And I am still learning. I mean, I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface, but I feel like I don't sit at the top of the ivory tower and bark and yell and, tell people what they should do. I'm more so like, hey, dude, I am you. I just know a thing or two a little bit more now than I did yesterday, and come along for the ride and we'll all learn together.
Yeah.
That's really it.
I'm picking up that energy from you, and it's one of the things I like about you, and just hanging out with you here in person and even interviewing you and being on the podcast is I'm like, oh, I know how to take that thing I'm seeing in you and adapt it to my personality and put on another layer. I look at it like almost like jewels in a crown. You know what I mean? Let me not jewels in a crown. This is a better example. Do you remember Boy Scouts? Were you ever a Boy Scout?
I was, yeah, for a minute, yeah.
Remember you could get the patches?
Yeah.
And there's like they were character traits or skills or something like that, right? And what I see in you is the authenticity, service. I'm one of you. I just happen to be down the road a little further than you. So if you come on this ride, you'll probably end up liking your life better if you hang out here for a while. That patch, I now get to put on my, what did you guys call those? Sashes? No, were they called a sash?
I can't remember what those things
But you know what I'm
called.
talking about, right?
Yeah.
The thing that came across your chest and you'd get the badge?
Yeah.
So that's how I look, and I go, oh, I now see what that looks like. Like in a real up-close, personal way about your story, about your thing, how you're building your thing. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take that badge and I'm going to start to apply for that. So that I got a lot of that out of that from you, especially hearing your story of how you build this thing. Because,
Thanks,
again, man, Larry, like, this is I just think that dads don't teach any of this shit anymore. Like, I didn't learn it from my dad. My dad's a great dude. Like, he was out there hitting the baseballs with me in the driveway. He took me to all my practices. If I forgot my glove at the field, he'd drive back and actually get it for me. Like, there's all the things, and I'm just like, but I didn't know anything about marriage. I didn't know anything about women. I didn't know anything about any of these things. So, dude, good on you, man.
Can I share just one more thing?
Yeah.
I think you're cut from the same cloth. I want to invite men to think about an idea. Actually, I invite couples to think about an idea. And this is the idea. When we become parents, like, suddenly the marriages, for some reason or another, take a back burner, and it's all about the kids. And I think that that's a huge miss. I think it's actually our duty. Like, it is our responsibility. That where else are they going to learn functional relationship skills from? I mean, the divorce rate is 50%, right? And that's some scary shit. And we're just repeating bad things that we probably saw growing up. And here's the other thing too. Our perception is, well, we've been married all this time. People grow apart. It's just what happens. It doesn't have to be what happens at all. You've been married for a while. I've been married. This is our 20th year. It is my responsibility to show my young boys, my young men, this is how you love a woman. This is how you appreciate a woman. This is how you communicate with a woman. This is how you're affectionate with a woman, respectful with a woman. And I bet Jesse is the same way as Jessica, which is Jessica's like, I need to show these boys how to love a man because I'm not going to tolerate, clowns coming around my boys. So I need to show how I respect him, how I appreciate him, how I love him, how I honor him, right? All these things, how I talk to him gracefully with respect and all these other things, quick story. I'll be fast, but like my wife.
Ask you a question before you say that.
Go ahead.
I want to tag on that. Do you get a lot of guys coming in like, dude, I want a Jessica?
Yeah, Jessica is sometimes, and it's only for the guys who kind of know her, but Jessica is like, she's kind of a guy's gal. She grew up blue collar, dirt bikes and dune buggies, and she's the type of chick that I always describe her this way. She'll throw on a pair of yoga pants, put her hair up in a ponytail, go kick your ass in a workout, punch you in the arm, and then go have a beer with you over lunch, and then have the most awesome freaking sex with you before the kids come home from school. Like, that's just how she's wired. She's just a badass. So
So when guys come in the program and they get to kind of know her better, like, oh, I want a Jessica, because it happens a lot. They're like, dude, where do I find my friends are? I'm like, where do I find a Jessie?
Where do I find a Jessie from?
I go, dude, you got to become a Keith.
But I think there's a lot of credibility that it's like, well, Jessica is Jessica, but the relationship dynamics are what they are because of what she does and what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My old name was Trevor.
No.
Yeah, so Jesse, I'll just say this, and then I want to hear your last story. Dude, so Jesse was like, I have to compartmentalize this version of you who, when we got back together, she's like, you were such a shitbag.
Yeah.
She goes, I got to come up with the douchiest name possible.
I do remember this.
Oh, yeah. So she called me Trevor, and then I went to Keith, and then became Sancho. So I was like, dude, Trevor wanted a Jesse too, but Trevor wasn't a fucking Sancho to actually be able to get her. So it's so fun to be able to model that not only for your family but for this extended group of dudes. That's all like, well, your words are more important than Jesus's words to probably a lot of these guys.
I hope not. That'd be scary.
Well, you probably give a little better marriage advice than he gave since he never really talked about it. You know what I mean? And they can't watch him. They didn't see him get married. They're not like, you are that guy in front of them for their eyes. They're like, my daughter said, Keith or Dada, are you famous? I go, no, not at all. We can go anywhere we want. No one's going to recognize me unless it's like local here because I grew up around here. I said, but to a lot of these guys, my words are more important than Jesus's because they're like, they've read Jesus's and their marriage is they're still stuck. But they read mine and they go, that's how I get unstuck. Like, that's why, that's how important I think your voice is. Not to be sacrilegious and anything like that to Jesus, but dude, it's so important. So tell this last story because I'm so excited these people get to be introduced to you, and then I hope they all go down the rabbit hole, and I can't wait for you to tell them where to find you and to follow you and all this stuff. I want all of them to just go do your thing.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'll tell you, not all days are sunshine and rainbows. Not all seasons are, right? But we have parameters of how we operate, even with conflict resolution. So the story is this happened a while ago. My oldest son. So Jess and I, we've got a great relationship. The kids never see us argue. It's because we don't really argue that much, hardly ever. But there was one day we were sitting on the deck, and we were having a conversation, but you could feel the tension, right? We don't yell at each other. That's one of our rules. We don't name call. That's another rule. We don't bring up past transgressions. That's another rule. So
great rules, by the way.
Yeah.
Those are great rules.
Nothing condescending or demeaning. And we let the other person talk before the other person does. So my son comes walking by while we're having this discussion, and he just stops and he looks at us. He goes, "Are you guys fighting?" And I was like, and I just kind of smiled, and Jessica smiled. And I was like, "We're having a disagreement." And he goes, "Are you guys going to get a divorce?" Oh, and I was like, and Jessica and I, in the middle of this, disagreement, we both started laughing. And I was like, "Divorce?" I was like, "Come on, man. I'm crazy about her." And vice versa. I was like, you know what? I was like, and I looked at Jessica. I was like, I want to offer him something as long as you're good with it. And she's like, "Okay, what is it?" And I said, "Ethan, if mom is okay with it, I want you to have a seat and I want you to watch this. I want you to watch this." And I was like, "Are you good with that?" She's like, "I don't have a problem with it." He sat down. 15 minutes. We did our thing, right? We got through it. And I looked at him and I go, "What'd you think?" And he goes, that was cool. I was like, "Well, what was cool about it?" And he goes, I was like, "What did you notice?" He goes, "You guys didn't raise your voice." I was like, "Yeah, we don't raise our voice." He goes, "You guys didn't call each other names." I was like, "We don't call each other names." I was like, "What else?" And he goes, "You worked it out and both people had to give a little bit towards the end." And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yeah, we don't punch each other in the face like you and your brothers do, right?" I was like, "Listen, I want you to take notes because this is how a functional relationship goes through conflict resolution. You know, the other way where it's name calling, yelling, screaming, walking away, stonewalling, all that other stuff, that doesn't happen, my friend. Oof. Not here. It used to, doesn't anymore." But I think that was and that's where I think, again, you know, it's our responsibility to show them what good looks like, the model, right?
Dude, that kid will never be the same.
I hope not.
I know, but like,
Yeah.
the thing I remember about my parents is when they got in a fight, my dad threw this remember Entenmann's, like the
donuts and all that, and the cakes.
The box of jelly-filled donuts at my mom up the stairs, and she ducked, and it splattered all along the wall. That's my biggest memory of them fighting.
Oh my
and I'm like, "Oh, dude, he's pissed." So, like, that was, like, what is going on? So, I have a lot of great memories with my dad, too. We still joke around, like, "Hey, dude, don't throw a jelly Danish at me." Like, "Hey, man, easy. Hey, is there any Entermans around here?" Dad's getting a little ticked off. So, but, dude, had I seen that, or had I seen my dad, or even, I'm going to say this, even an uncle. Because I think uncles are just like rent-a-dads, like they're not rent-a-dads, like proxy dad. They're like the next step away from a dad. But like all of Garrett's kids, they all call me Uncle Keith, and I'm able to talk to them differently than their dad. They're like, "Well, why didn't my dad say that?" I go, "Because he's your dad. He's looking at you differently than I am. I'm your uncle. That's how it works around here." So I look at like all this is great advice for uncles too, to be like, "Hey, man." I wish my uncles would have modeled this and seen this type of stuff like what you're talking about. That's the greatest gift ever, man.
Oh, thanks, man.
Tell all of them where to find you, whatever you want them to do. Go to this page, click this thing, whatever it is. Be as explicit and as enthusiastic about it as you possible. Because, dude, I want more men hearing about your stuff and literally like just follow what Larry's doing. I say that, guys, follow me, your life's going to be better, but I can say that about you too. So
man, I appreciate
follow
that.
this guy and get him in your ear.
I appreciate that, man. I'm not hard to find. The Dad Edge everywhere on Instagram, the Dad Edge, thedadedge.com with the in it. So we have two different programs. One is it's just the Dad Edge Alliance. That's for our guys who are not business owners. They're more like the career dad, whatever your job is. And then we have also the business boardroom Dad Edge as well. So that's for our entrepreneurs. And I personally run that one with three other coaches. That one's near and dear to my heart because you know this as well as I do. If you're a business owner, there is a lot of mental and emotional, sometimes even physical bandwidth that goes into that business and your teams and your customers and everything else. And our minds, we can tend to empty the tank pretty hardcore, right? Not to say that other guys don't, but we have a program specifically for those guys as well.
Got it. Yeah. I love it, man. So at the Dad Edge.
Yeah, at the Dad
on
Edge.
Instagram. Is there any particular platform that you interact with the most or that you like people to go to most? For me, it's like Instagram. Like go to Instagram because I'll actually respond to those DMs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. Instagram is usually the easiest one for me. It's just more of a fun platform, I think, to put things out on. Facebook, a little bit, but the Dad Edge on Instagram and then thedadedge.com.
Cool, man. Well, it's been an honor to have you at the table here. I can't wait for you to sign the door because we have everybody who does. We sign the door. Yeah. We've had some really fun and awesome guests here sign that door. And guys, listen, I want you to follow him. If what he said has resonated with you, follow it down the rabbit hole. I know how this goes. I have coaches and I have people that I've heard on podcasts where I was like, oh shit, I just loved the way he said that, or man, the way he phrased that, or his story, something caused you to go, I really resonate with what's going on there. Follow that. The greatest lessons that I've learned in my life from the greatest teachers of my life are, I just happen to hear them and I go, oh shit, man, I'm so glad I heard that voice. And so we are a spot where we encourage you to follow that out with all your heart. And if you go, man, I resonate with what's happening and I want to be a part of a group like that, maybe married game and stuff doesn't resonate with you, but you like the topics, but you really resonate with this guy. Go all in, because if you're not around a tribe of dudes, like I always say, we don't need a tribe to survive anymore, but we do need a tribe to thrive. And so find whatever that is, and if Larry's your guy, go gung-ho and let us know. I just get excited. I don't just look at this platform as disseminating information, but connecting people. So don't be a nerd, spread the word, and keep crushing it, because that shit is contagious.